All right, well, a couple weeks ago, I got the opportunity to film a couple volunteer onboarding videos for a local church, and I think they turned out pretty cool. So in this video, I'm gonna give you kind of a breakdown of how I planned them, what the pitch was initially, and then how I filmed it and how it all kind of came together in the edit. Let's get started. So this project was for Promise City Church out in Salisbury, North Carolina. Their team is awesome. I've gotten to work with them on a couple projects by now, and it's been really, really fun. And I especially love this project because it was a lot kind of similar to some of the course videos that I filmed for my course, as it was a little more educational, and they were essentially wanting 5 videos to show to new volunteers as they walk through kind of an onboarding process. So there wasn't a whole lot of direction outside of that, really. So I kind of got to choose the studio and the look. And then I know that they wanted to use a teleprompter, which was really cool, and it honestly made the filming a whole lot easier. So every video was entirely scripted out. So I ended up choosing to film at a studio that I know the owners of, and they're awesome, out in Concord, downtown Concord, North Carolina, called 777, and I'd highly recommend them. They were super, super good. The studio is great. They have a white cyc wall in the background, and then they basically have a bunch of aperture Amaran 300Cs mounted on the top, so you can just splash color through the app onto that background. So it worked out really well. I kind of had a frame of reference that I wanted to kind of mimic, which was really just someone standing in front of like kind of a gradient background. And I wasn't entirely sure if that was like background paper or something or light, but turns out light makes it a lot easier on a white background. So in the filming process, the teleprompter wasn't the most professional setup, I would say, but it actually ended up working out really well. So it's kind of the same setup that I used for filming a lot of my course videos. Even if I just had like bullet points, I would set this up so I could look at the camera and kind of see what I'm going to be walking through in the video. And the way that I did that is I just had an old, literally iPhone 8 that I bought for like, I don't know, $50. I loaded the Teleprompter Pro app, I believe, onto that. It's a subscription, but I've kind of just been using the free version because it works really, really well. And then I have the same version on my laptop. I had my wife sit at my laptop while we were filming and had it remote control the phone, so you can literally see what's on the screen of the phone sitting in front of the camera. And so she's like pausing and playing and scrolling as they go, which is very challenging. So it was great to have another person to actually handle that while I'm kind of listening and making sure everything else is set. And then for the actual setup, I used a Glide Gear teleprompter kit, which is basically nothing more than just kind of a kit you set your camera on, and it uses the mirror so you can set a phone or a little iPad mini up. And that worked out really well, honestly. Again, that's kind of how I filmed a lot of the course videos for Better Church Video. So it was already kind of tested, and I didn't have to do a whole lot of troubleshooting with that whole setup. And there were 3 Amaran 300Cs on the background, so I could control the color of those on the app. So I ended up kind of setting one color to the top leftish area and the bottom right to a different one, so it kind of made a gradient across the screen. There was one backlight. They had another 300C there with kind of a square softbox that I just used as the backlight. And then I used my Amaran 200X just with a light dome 2 as the main key light. And I think that worked out great. The colors on this, I'm super happy with. Audio-wise, I just had a Sennheiser MKE 600 going into a Zoom H6 Essential, which is kind of their new like 32-bit version of the Zoom H6. Recording in 32-bit, not having to set gain has been pretty incredible, especially for something like that. Being able to hit record and just know that my audio is going to be great no matter what is kind of a game changer. So that was super cool. Camera-wise, I just used 2 Sony A7 IVs. Pretty sure they each had a Sigma 24-70. One had the version 1 and one had version 2. But that just made it easy because they're both 2.8. So I think my main shot was in the 24-35 range. And then the secondary shot was like all the way zoomed into 70. And it was just like slightly off center, but on the opposite side of my key light, which is what I always kind of try and do to maintain that like nice contrast between the light and shooting from the opposite side, shooting shadow side. Timeline wise, for the day of filming, we booked the studio from 1 to about 4:30. And so we ended up having them all arrive at like 2 and then 2:30 and then I think 3 or 3:15 or something like that. And obviously these shoots always go longer than you expect them to. That's kind of just how it is. But that actually allowed me plenty of time. So we ended up wrapping by like 3:30 and I was able to pretty much get everything torn down by 4:30. So having an hour for setup, that's really about the minimum that I've been giving myself nowadays, especially if we have to bring gear up into a studio and stuff like that. So an hour, hour and a half even is probably what I would estimate setup time. And teardown, I think, was much quicker. It was probably 45 minutes or so. So that's pretty much all the filming portion. It actually went really smoothly, and we stayed pretty much on schedule, which is great. So I'm going to move on to the editing portion, which is, again, is where a lot of this came together. Because with these kind of educational or instructional videos, if you want to say that, a lot of it really comes together in editing and just finding ways you can use motion graphics and other things like that to really keep it as engaging as possible for people that are watching. Obviously, there's tons of ways to do this. I'm editing in DaVinci Resolve. I have the studio version. I'll go ahead and show you my project settings real quick. So 4K, 23.976. Only other thing I've changed is set the color space, timeline, and output to Rec 709A, which just gives me a really, really similar result to QuickTime if you ever had that issue after you export. That just makes whatever I export from here look just like QuickTime, so that's been really good. And then really how I start is I end up just dumping all my footage, because I have to line up the audio and then 2 cameras into a multicam sequence. So multicam for this, I would say, is essential, because you don't want to be cutting clips all over the place and having one on another layer and then now they're misaligned because you moved something. It can be like a complete nightmare. So multicam I would highly recommend. So I'll go ahead and open up my multicam timeline. Just make these a little bigger. So down here I have my audio from the Zoom, and then we have cam 1 and cam 2. And I've kind of trimmed out some of the parts that just aren't relevant. I mean, some of the in-between times, just to make it a little easier to sort through later on. And for this project, I actually dumped all the footage into one, as you can see. So this whole thing is like a 47-minute long sequence. So not to say that's the best way to do it, but it is kind of the easiest and that I've found. And so then after that, really what I just start doing is dropping this into a new timeline and then breaking it up by person. So kind of show you my final timeline. Video-wise, the first one was really just an intro video, and then the second, third, and fourth are all actually instructional. They were talking about Planning Center. There was one on emotional intelligence as a team, and then one kind of talking about the heart behind serving. So those are really cool. I love the heart behind having volunteers watch these videos. Just with how concise they were, being scripted, it helped a lot as well. And then the fifth one, the last one, was just a welcome from both the pastors of the church. I'm just going to start with this intro here. You can see we have our multicam sequence. I kind of kept it on cam 1 the whole time till we get over to here, and then back to cam 1 for the end. There's not a whole lot to these editing. That's kind of why it makes these a little simpler than testimonies. Really what I have here is the audio from angle 3, which is our Zoom recorder. We have our camera angle on 1, have her name banner, which I'll show you here in a second how I kind of made that. So this kind of just animates on, pretty simple, animates off. And then I have a couple sound effects in here I threw in from Artlist, where it zooms in and shows some of the other videos. So she's kind of introducing these 3 videos that you're going to watch later on. So I finished those up and then dropped in those sequences here. Just added a border around them. And then this adjustment clip, I'll show you in a lot of these other videos, but the adjustment clip's actually where I made a lot of these animations. So if I go up to the keyframes, you can see in this adjustment clip, these are zooming in and then panning up and up and to the left, I guess. So that's pretty cool. And then it kind of just does the same thing coming out like that. And I've kind of done the same with a lot of other videos that I made recently. I just like being able to include them in the side and not cut to a whole separate screen to show some other content on screen. So I kind of threw in a really low swish sound, and this whole track level is at -28 and these are at -3. So it's very, very quiet, but it adds just a little extra sound effect to zooming in. So that's kind of the process for this first video, but really what I've been doing lately is actually color grading before I get to the editing. So I'm gonna go back to my multicam timeline here and actually probably start with this one. I'll show you how I color graded this, and that's a pretty big part. There's a lot going on in the color. So I'm gonna disable this track and then go to cam 1. Find a good frame of her talking real quick. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So I'm gonna go to the color page, and then click on here. And I think I actually grouped these together. Yeah, I just grouped these because they're all Cam 1. So I didn't do that for the other clips, but because she had multiple videos, I just grouped them all together and they look exactly the same. So this is all group post clip. I'm drag all these over. And the only thing I did on the clip for this specific clip was just use the patch replacer. I'll just show you what I did here. Just replace some of these segments that kind of had just blemishes in the wall, which was really easy enough to just patch replace. And same with this, there was like a light switch, but with this smooth gradient, it was super easy to replace. So for the actual color grade, I'm gonna just turn all these off. So you can see this was the Sony S-Log 3 that I shot straight out of camera for Cam 1. And then really what I do here is I take one color space transform, going to DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, and that's going to change it to still gray, still super desaturated. And then at the end, I'm going to do all my color grading, pretty much all of it in that DaVinci Wide Gamut, just because it gives you a little more flexibility than the initial Sony S-Log 3. But then here at the end, this color space, I'm going from DaVinci Wide Gamut, DaVinci Intermediate, back to Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, which is what we want for our final output. So turn that on, and you get like a pretty good looking image. It looks pretty decent right off the bat, but obviously there's not a lot of saturation. The colors don't really pop like they did in the final video we just had up. So I'm gonna close this out. And then the only other thing I threw on here was a LUT, which works a lot better when you're actually in Rec 709. So this is one of Landon, by the way's cinema grades. This is CG02. So just turn that on, and it already gives us a good bit more color, and it just tweaks some of those colors to look a little bit better. So I've been liking that a lot. You can see, and I'll turn it on and off once we get some of these other nodes turned on. HDR, I don't know if I did a whole lot here. I think I just boosted the exposure, gave it a little more brightness, because then when we do some of the contrast and saturation, it does bring it down a little bit, I find. So I ended up having to go in and give it a little more lift. And then add in some contrast. I don't really have a crazy method for this. I just bump up the contrast and kind of play with the pivot to find a good middle ground where I like. And I really only ended up boosting it by like 0.1. So it gives a little more contrast, and you can see we're definitely getting closer to where we want to be here. And then I added this curve in. It doesn't do a whole lot, it just adds a little more contrast. It just adjusts kind of the low, shadows, and then some of the highlights. Gives it a little more interesting contrast curve. Saturation, this really adds a ton. And what I've been doing here, I think I saw a reel, somebody did it on Instagram, where you change your color space of this node to HSV, and then you just boost up the green channel on the gamma. And I couldn't tell you a single thing of why that works, but the contrast, I think, or saturation looks way better than it does by just upping this saturation. So I've been using that a ton, and you can tell just by this saturation right here, like we're getting really close to where we want to be with this image. So looking really, really good. And then I did have this curve, I think it was a hue versus sat curve for her face, and it just brought a little bit of saturation out, a little bit of the purple out. And then this one wasn't doing a whole lot on this image here, but I'll show you a few of the other ones that I copied this from, like especially this blue background. I really had to do it quite a bit to take some of the blue out of their like skin tone. So this isn't doing the most on this image here, but it's doing a lot on the other ones that I copied it from. So I think I just left it on. And then the background, this isn't doing a whole lot either. I think what I just did is basically nothing. I don't know why I did this, but I did. So that's pretty much the grade. So going from Rec 709 to this, looks like this. It's not really overly that complicated. A lot of my color grading is using a LUT that just tweaks it to make it a little better. So even without that, you can tell it just gives it so much more like boost in the saturation. So I use those a ton. But really, other than that, it's just adding contrast, saturation, adjusting the exposure, and an HDR node here if we need it. And then it's adjusting any specific colors that I think need tweaking. And that's pretty much my process for every video. These are all pretty much the same because they're all grouped. So all those main camera angles from her were the same. I'll just go over if there's any other ones we want to look at from her. Wow, my notes are all over the place. This one had a lot more. Couldn't really tell you why. The patch is just in a compound node because I had a lot more I needed to replace, I think. So these I'll just show you off. There was like this light, that was my background light, C-stand, and some other little marks I think I just took off, but that's super easy in Resolve. Yeah, so this one's the same way, like looks fine. Background, you can already tell is gonna come out really, really well, but we'll start by turning these on. So HDR, again, about the same amount of lift on the exposure. Got some contrast in there, same curve. I brightened up this corner over here because it was just a little dark, kind of looked like a vignette, but it was only on one corner, so I just brightened it up. Saturation added a ton, exactly the same method by 0.03 over here. Face, I think I just brought down the saturation on this, and that allowed me to bring it up on the whole image a little bit more. Purple, same way. I think I did leave this on, but let's see if it kind of cleans it up later on. And then I got a LUT, which again kind of tweaked the color in her face to make it a little warmer. So I think that's probably why I brought down the saturation on her face a little bit earlier. Background saturation, I think I just brought it down in the blues and greens so it wasn't so like crazy neon. And then the patch replacer, and there we go. Looks pretty good. So the only one I'll go through is James, because his I had to do a lot more tweaking on, probably the most, just because I was getting a lot of purple on his face and it's really hard to bring that out from a good skin tone. So it's balancing with the green and the white balance and pulling out the purple and all sorts of things. So that's where this purple node came from, and there was a lot of stuff I had to do for that. So let's walk through this one. I'm not going to cover all these other ones. These are exactly the same, but the purple node, I'll actually show you what I did for this shot. You can see without it, it's getting really purple up in his eyes, and even there's a lot of purple bounce coming from above. I don't exactly remember why that was happening, but probably from some of these lights that were blue purple-ish. So with it on, it does look a little more green instantly, but you can tell it is actually a lot more neutral colored. So I'll go ahead and just show what this node is actually doing. It shows qualifier on here, but all these are turned off, so there's nothing actually qualified. But if I go through these, I think what I did is just tweak some of this curve, which couldn't even tell you what I did. It's a lot of the green and the red bringing it up. So it's taking a little bit of that purple, that bluish out technically by bringing up the red and green. And then I think on the primary wheels here, I was just playing with the white balance and I ended up getting it pretty close. So I didn't actually need to qualify any colors, which I like to avoid because that can get pretty finicky. I'd rather make adjustments to the entire image so I know they're not going to get like cut off later on, or the edges are going to get weird. I'm going to move on, and I'm probably going to walk through James's video because this kind of had the most editing that went into it. So really what I went through is just cut out all the parts that were less good takes, and we did a few with him, so I was really able to refine what was actually a good take. So I went in and just added markers in here for where I wanted headers and where I wanted text to come up. So he also had a name banner, and then I'm just switching back and forth between cameras, between takes. So he's just talking, and then once it gets to here, we did the same that we did for the other clip. I just had some text fly in on the side, which again, you don't have to make it complicated, honestly. I mean, this just zooms in, and then I easy eased all those keyframes. And then I just used a push effect in and out, easing on this, made it shorter, and then here we go. Look at that, pretty easy. All built-in effects, no plugins or anything. And then these are all just fading on different texts. And then I'll show you how I made this. This was also like built-in plugins. It's not that complicated. And so the music kind of brings up, comes down. I did the same thing over here. Switches to him. These just fade up. Pretty basic. And these ones, some of these I didn't even zoom in on. I just cut as if it's like another camera. That's pretty much it. Right here at the end, same. Got another verse. Got another verse. Pretty basic. I mean, once the color's good and then you kind of figure out how you can merge some of these motion graphics in with the footage and you don't have to cut to a whole nother slide, even though I did that as well. It just makes it a whole lot more engaging, keeps you kind of watching them while you're also reading the text. I love doing stuff like that. And then before I get to audio, Last thing for this Planning Center one, I took like some screenshots, screen recordings of Planning Center to kind of show what she's talking about on screen. And I did that with the same software I'm using to record my screen on here, which is Screen Studio. And I really, really love that screen recording program. I used it for my entire course. There's a whole lot of control, and especially for things like this, you can make the mouse movements look really smooth, and it looks really professional, like it's custom animated. So if you're making videos like that, it kind of is a game changer to have a good screen recorder where you can make your mouse look a little bigger, smooth out the animations, stuff like that. So did that, kind of dropped in the icons so people could recognize the logos. So on to the audio section. I'm going to start with her video because it's a little longer, and I did take some EQing to get hers exactly right. So I'm just going to turn off these other ones. You can hear the raw audio here. No limiter, just open up our EQ. And I just use the default EQ, the default compressor, and then a limiter. And that's what I do on 99% of my videos. And that's really all you need if you know how to EQ a vocal well, and if you know how to compress it to keep the level even. I mean, that's kind of all you got to do. So I'm just going to mute the music, start playing it, and you can kind of hear my EQ before and after.
With this system, there are multiple channels to make communication easier for all of us to use. The two Planning Center apps that we use are called Services and Church Center. Utilizing Services and Church Center will ensure that you are up to date on all announcements, changes, and happenings going on at Promise City Church, and will ensure that you are prepared for each time that you serve.
So it sounds a lot better and a lot cleaner. It's kind of cutting out a lot of the extra noise. But then obviously with that, you lose a little bit of audio gain. So I did boost it up just barely over here, and I don't do that a whole lot. Really, a lot of that boost is going to come from compressing it and then raising it back up with makeup gain. So let's go ahead and move on to that. So this is just the dynamics. You can do a couple things, but I do the compressor most often. And I don't play with a whole lot of these settings, honestly. Usually I'll just choose the compression preset and then really tweak the threshold and this makeup gain. So I'm adding a lot of makeup gain here, 8 to 9 dB, and the threshold's at -22. I don't know, pretty much the threshold is when it's going to start kicking in. The makeup gain is what you're raising the whole level up to. So you're basically just cutting off some of that top, not cutting off, you're lowering some of the high volume so it's a little closer to the low level, and then you're raising the whole thing back up. That's pretty much what's happening. So that's why they call it makeup gain, is you're making up for what you're compressing off of those higher signals. So I'll kind of hear before and after, and you can see where it's actually coming up here on the compressor.
First things first, in order to serve effectively, having these...
I actually really like DaVinci Resolve, how this visually looks. This actually helped me understand compression a lot better than some other softwares. So you can kind of see the bubbles, they're coming up on this line because it's off. So that's just the default. And then you can even see, it even shows kind of the hold and attack and release because of where they're floating up here. So they should raise up to this line and then kind of taper off when we get further up towards the top.
These two apps are mandatory. The Services app will be utilized to schedule all of your serving time here at Promise City Church. You are able to do a few things with Services, like blockout dates. Blockout dates allow...
So you can see some of it's still getting through, but then it's kind of tapering off towards here. And that's kind of what you want. You don't necessarily want to like hard limit vocals where you just take it down and then raise it all up. It helps to have a little bit of softening towards the top. And that's what this ratio is for. That'll like, you know, this would be a hard limiter, a 20 to 1. And then this would be like basically nothing, 1.2 to 1. So I usually keep it between the like 2 to 4-ish, and I find that's pretty natural for most vocals. And that's pretty much it. Obviously, having music in there helps with some of that background noise, because without it, you are hearing some of that room noise, but with music in, sounds really, really nice.
For us to be able to see when you are not available to serve and assists in scheduling. If you know that you're going to be out of town or you have to work, go ahead and block those dates out by...
And the last thing I threw on here is a limiter, which is just going to keep it from going above 0. And that's all, pretty much all that I'm doing. I'm not actually like raising it up any level. I'm just adding a -0.5 dB ceiling. And that's what I like to use limiters for. I prefer to, I think the right way to do it is to use compressors to really refine your vocal and get the level you want. And then use limiters a little more like technically just to keep it from as a safety, I guess would be a good way to say it. So to kind of keep it from going above that 0 mark and distorting. And then I think this was disabled, but a lot of times I'll just throw a -0.5 limiter on the master just in case, sound effect and music and vocal kind of all hits at once, and it might peak in the final mix, which I don't think is likely, but sometimes I'll turn that on as just a safety, and you can save quite a bit just from doing that alone. That's about it. Again, these sound effects are really low. I mean, they're at like -30 something dB, so you can barely hear them, but I think I can hear them a little bit on some speakers, so they help with the transition into that animation. And then the last thing I'll cover is the music, because as you can see in these, I kind of have these slides come down and the music raises up for just a second and then it comes back down, and obviously there's no keyframes here, so I'm actually using the ducker that's built into DaVinci Resolve, and it's been really good honestly for this kind, because I was moving around footage and I don't want to readjust my keyframes on the music track. That would be such a pain. So what I did is use the ducker. So if I click on this entire track, it shows up over here in the source. I want it to use my voiceover for the source, and the level is going to be 10. I did play with the advanced settings just a little bit, and really what it's basically doing is, instead of ducking it, it's kind of actually raising it, because I have it ducked for most of this video. So most of this, it's actually ducked by, let's see, music, -30, because it's bringing it down 10, and the level's already set to -20. And so then in these sections here, it's not ducking it by 10, so it's keeping it at -20. So that worked out really well. I'd recommend checking that out, playing with the advanced settings, and you can get it really smooth for when you want it to come up and down. All right, now lastly, I know this is a long video, but hopefully some of this is helpful in just seeing my process for pretty much this entire project. Lastly, I'm gonna break down some of the motion graphics that I made for this, which is fun. I kind of like being able to dive into After Effects on occasion, create some motion graphics, and then bring those into DaVinci Resolve. Really just 2 that I actually animated, and then I just duplicated those a whole lot. So I kind of grouped these by video, and then the 4 name banners that I had to create. So these are pretty easy, honestly. There's not a whole lot going on. Really what I just did was make a background rectangle, and I'll turn these off. And really all that's doing is just animating in left to right. So I separated the positions, because that kind of can be a pain if you're just doing one position and you're trying to deal with both directions. So I separated position, just X, and this is just easy easing. So literally 2 keyframes, and then I just select both of them, function F9, easy ease. And then I added the title, which is doing the same thing, just coming up from the bottom. And then I just track matted both of these to the background. So you can just drag it over, and then make sure your background is also still shown, so that then it just doesn't show unless it's like coming up over the background essentially. Did the same thing, easy ease these, same thing for the top, easy ease that one. I like to have this one come first because it's above. And if you have it swapped, it looks a little weird because it's overlapping. So a lot of that's just about timing, honestly. So that comes in first, then the top, then the bottom. That just sits. Usually for these, I kind of like to make the whole comp like 8 seconds or so. I find like I like 8 seconds for name banners, especially in videos, but live you might want to go a little longer. Again, 4K 24. And then at the end, really all I did was like copy all these, paste them down here, and then just right click and went to time reverse. So it'll like flip all of them around to be the inverse. And then you probably just need to play with the timing a little bit and they come back out. That's pretty much it. Not that much to it. I didn't do any real wild essential graphics, essential properties work on this. I just duplicated it because I only had 4 of them. And I had to make some of these just a little longer to fit some of these longer titles. And then the only other one I made, I'll walk through, is this header that I kind of called it. And this was similar, so I just had a giant solid as the background, animate down. And then this coin did the same thing, just slid down. Both of those are eased. And then this title up here, I just have a preset. I just use an animation preset for this, which is what I do most of the time. You can just come in here, text, animate in, and literally all these are pretty decent. I can't remember exactly which one I used for this, but you should just try a bunch of these, or Some of them are by word, some are by character, and some are by line. So really whatever works. It might be, I think it's random fade in that I used. So it would just fade in by character. And then I just moved around some of the keyframes to make it a little unique. And then Find Freedom, literally the exact same preset. This held on for just like 2 seconds or so. And then I just track matted everything to this background again. And instead of like animating them all off and make it really complicated, since they're all track matted, all I did was brought the background down, and that's gonna hide everything else. Sick, so that's the video, that's the project. Hopefully you got something from this video. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to know about this in the comments, or if there's any other videos you want me to do a breakdown of. Other than that, thanks for watching. Let me know if you liked it down in the comments, and I'll see you later.